There are moments when the silence between two thoughts seems to hold more truth than any word. It's in that almost invisible interval that something greater reveals itself, a field that responds, embraces, and reorganizes what you are. Quantum consciousness is not a distant concept. It's the realization that every mental gesture interacts with the fabric of the universe, shaping realities even before they become visible. When attention aligns with the present moment, time seems to give way to a broader presence. That presence is the bridge between what you think you are and what the cosmos already recognizes in you, a mind intertwined with everything that exists. The mind is a shifting boundary between two worlds, that of form and that of potential. Everything you perceive, believe, or fear is born at this point of contact between the concrete experience and the invisible field that sustains it. It's as if every thought were a particle that, at the same time, carries a wave of possibility. When observed, it condenses into reality. When left free, it vibrates in an ocean of uncollapsed probabilities. The mind, therefore, is not merely a passive observer, but the very mechanism through which the universe recognizes itself. Imagine the brain working as a translator, capturing the subtle frequencies of the quantum field and transforming them into sensations, memories, and decisions. But the brain is only the instrument. The true operator is the consciousness that inhabits it. This consciousness is the point where the finite touches the infinite, where the invisible becomes measurable through experience. When you think, you are not merely processing data, you are shaping space-time around you. That's why, often, intuition arrives before reasoning, because the field has already responded before verbal thought took form. When we speak of the mind as a bridge, we don't refer to a symbolic link, but to a real dynamic. In quantum physics, the state of superposition describes how something can exist in multiple possibilities until observed. The human mind participates in that same principle. It observes, selects, and stabilizes one version of reality among infinite ones. This choice is rarely conscious. It happens vibrationally, guided by the emotions, beliefs, and expectations you hold consistently. The universe doesn't read your verbal intentions, but the energetic pattern that sustains them. What creates this bridge is not isolated will, but the coherence between what you think, feel, and do. When there's misalignment, thoughts of abundance coupled with emotions of fear, for instance, the bridge wavers and the field responds with mixed signals. But when there's convergence, something changes in the texture of time. Coincidences become denser. Opportunities arise fluidly. People appear with the precision of an invisible calculation. This is not chance disguised as a miracle. It's the natural geometry of a mind aligned with the field. Some see this interaction as poetic metaphor, but there is a measurable correspondence. Studies in neuroscience show that states of mindfulness reduce neural noise, allowing the brain to enter electrical coherence. Brain waves synchronized with heart and breathing rhythm. In quantum terms, it would be like reducing the noise of the observer to allow for a clearer reading of the field. The bridge stabilizes as the mind learns to silence the excess of projections. You can test this empirically. Close your eyes and imagine someone you haven't spoken to in a long time. Observe without effort. If the image comes lightly, perhaps a spontaneous contact will arise in the coming days. It's not magic, but resonance. Focused attention is a form of directed energy, and the quantum field is sensitive to that focus. Every mind is a transmitter and receiver of non-local information. When two systems come into tune, what physics calls entanglement occurs, and what human experience recognizes as synchronicity. The mental bridge is not built once, it is maintained. It requires clearing internal noise, judgments, comparisons, rigid expectations. The more transparent your attention becomes, the more faithfully the field responds. This reciprocity is the foundation of quantum consciousness. It's as if the universe were constantly asking, are you truly present for what you're creating right now? Each response is a frequency adjustment. Many believe that creating your own reality is an act of force, but it's more an act of listening. The mind as a bridge must learn to listen before transmitting. When thought becomes an extension of listening, it loses rigidity and gains power. The ideas born in that space are not mere personal desires, but impulses of universal coherence flowing through you. The difference between desiring and co-creating lies here. Desire tries to control the flow. Co-creation moves within it. Throughout the day, you may notice how often the mind disconnects from the bridge. It happens every time it gets lost in distraction, judgment, or anxiety. In those moments, attention fragments and the field responds with dispersion. But a single instant of presence is enough to re-establish the bridge. A softened gaze, a deeper breath, a pause between thoughts. Small gestures that reopen the channel with the universe. When the mind is understood as a bridge, it transforms the very definition of individuality. You cease to be an isolated observer and become an extension of universal consciousness in motion. The I becomes a point of interface between what is local and what is cosmic. And in that understanding, separation dissolves. The universe ceases to be an external stage and reveals itself as a living field of subtle interactions, of which your mind is an essential part. The simple act of perceiving this connection already alters how energy flows. By recognizing yourself as the bridge, you change the nature of the crossing. There is no fixed destination or promise of total control, only the dance between observer and observed. And in this dance, every thought is a step, every emotion a rhythm, every silence an opportunity to hear what the cosmos whispers in response. There is an invisible substance supporting all that exists, a silent fabric in which every particle, thought, and emotion is immersed. This fabric is the quantum field, not as a distant idea, but as the vibrational structure that holds the universe together. Modern physics describes it as a sea of energy underlying all matter, where nothing is truly solid, only vibrations at different levels of density. It is in this field that the laws of separation dissolve. What seems to be you and what seems to be the other are merely different patterns within the same primordial ripple. Imagine the surface of a calm lake. Every movement creates small waves that expand, collide, and blend until it's impossible to tell which belong to whom. So, it is with the quantum field, a living web of interferences. Every human thought is a small disturbance in this universal lake. The field responds not linearly, but through resonance, amplifying vibrations that find correspondence and softening those lost in dissonance. That's why certain people and situations seem to attract each other, while others repel for no apparent reason. Science already suggests that the quantum vacuum, far from being empty, is an incessant fullness of fluctuations. Particles appear and disappear in intervals so brief they defy the notion of continuous time. If matter is made up of these transient phenomena, then everything we perceive as solid is actually a fleeting event of organized energy. The mind, when attuned, can sense the rhythms of this flow. That's why there are moments when intuition seems to emerge from nothing. But in the quantum field, nothing is simply the space between one manifestation and another, fertile, pulsating, and full of information. The field does not obey classical rules of distance. It is non-local. That means what happens in one point can instantly influence another, without any visible physical exchange. This principle, known as quantum entanglement, is not just a microscopic phenomenon. It's the metaphysical foundation of every sense of unity the human being experiences. When you feel a deep connection with someone far away, when you think of a person and they message you at that very moment, you are witnessing echoes of that non-local connectivity. The field is the network where all consciousnesses intertwine. However, this interconnection is not random. The field responds to coherence. When a mind is scattered, its signal fragments, and the field returns noise, disjointed coincidences, repetitive cycles, lack of direction. But when there is internal coherence, when thought, feeling, and body vibrate in the same rhythm, the field reorganizes information harmoniously. It's as if the universe tuned the surrounding instruments to accompany your melody. This attunement is what ancient masters called the state of grace, and what modern science describes as coherent order. The quantum field is also the mirror of attention. Wherever you direct consciousness, the field densifies. It's as if each gaze, each idea sustained for a few seconds, created a small energetic vortex. Sustained long enough, That vortex takes form, attracts circumstances, and becomes experience. Reality, therefore, is not a sequence of independent facts, but a continuous dance between what is observed and what observes. The mind provides the focus, the field, the substance. Together, they compose the fabric of all that exists. This interaction can be subtly perceived in the body. When the mind rests in open awareness, the heartbeat slows, the breath expands, and the heart's electromagnetic field becomes more coherent. Studies show that this state of cardiac coherence changes how the brain processes information, making it more synchronized with the nervous system. In quantum terms, this means the body becomes a clearer field of observation, less subject to internal noise. The universe seems to respond faster not because the laws change, but because the observer has become a clean channel. There is a constant reciprocity between you and the field. It's not an external space. It's the backdrop that gives existence to your very consciousness. When you remember that you are immersed in it, something shifts in your perception of reality. The boundaries between inside and outside become porous. The world ceases to be a series of events happening to you and becomes an extension of your vibrational state. This understanding doesn't eliminate mystery, it makes it intimate. Instead of seeking the universe among the stars, you recognize it in the pulses of your own being. To understand the quantum field is, in a sense, to understand silence. It's not emptiness, but a space of pure possibility. It is in silence that waves return to calm, and the lake reflects clearly the sky above it. The human mind, when it dives into this silence, rediscovers its common origin with all things. The field is the place where matter and consciousness merge, where every impulse becomes the language of the cosmos. Perceiving this doesn't require faith, only presence. Science reaches the edge of this realization. Experience completes it. When you observe the world with undivided attention, you realize that nothing is truly separate. The field is in everything, and everything is field. With each breath, this totality reorganizes itself in response to the vibration of your inner state. It's at this point that physics becomes practical spirituality, when the knowledge of the field transforms into a way of living, a way of being conscious within the universal flow. Each thought that arises in your mind is a vibration emitted into the fabric of the quantum field. It is not a metaphor. It is an energetic translation of information. Just as a stone thrown into a lake creates ripples, a thought generates a sequence of subtle waves that propagate through space, interfering with other waves and shaping the probabilities of what we call reality. The human mind is, at the same time, a transmitter and a receiver of frequencies, adjusting at every moment according to the content and intensity of the attention you sustain. Physics recognizes that all matter is, essentially, energy organized in vibrational patterns. Consciousness, when expressed in the form of thought, acts as a modulator of this energy. This means that the quality of thoughts, not only their logical content, but the emotional tone that accompanies them, defines the kind of signal you emit. Thoughts charged with fear, resentment, or doubt produce incoherent waves that tend to generate chaotic, scattered realities. Thoughts imbued with clarity, gratitude, and trust, on the other hand, vibrate in ordered patterns, favoring synchronicities and flow. This difference is not merely symbolic, it can be felt physically. When a thought is dense, the body contracts, the breath shortens, the muscles tense, the heart rate accelerates. The nervous system registers this state as alert, and the surrounding field adjusts to that defensive frequency. When the thought is light and expansive, the body reacts in harmony. There is relief, warmth, a sense of openness. In that instant, brain waves enter slower, more coherent patterns, allowing information from the field to be perceived more clearly. Think of your mind as a musical instrument. Each thought is a note, and together they form a continuous melody. This music resonates with other similar frequencies in the field, attracting experiences that vibrate in the same tone. The life you perceive is, to a large extent, the echo of this inner symphony. The harmony or noise you encounter on the outside reflects the degree of attunement between what you think, feel, and believe. Nothing happens in isolation. The field merely replicates on an amplified scale the vibrational pattern you sustain the longest. There is an essential distinction between casual thought and sustained thought. The first is a spark that soon goes out. The second is a continuous wave that propagates until it finds correspondence. When you repeat an idea, positive or negative, it creates a trail in the brain and a trace in the field. The more often that trail is traveled, the easier it becomes to repeat the same pattern. This is how beliefs are formed and, over time, recurring realities. Physics would call this constructive interference, when in-phase waves add up and reinforce one another. Conscious practice begins when you observe your own mental flow without identifying with it. Observation transforms the vibration. An unconscious thought has brute force. An observed thought is refined. It is as if the light of attention reorganized the particles of the mind. In that instant, the field responds differently. The frequency ceases to be reactive and becomes creative. This is the point at which consciousness assumes the role of conductor and not merely a spectator of the inner spectacle. You can notice this in a simple way. By recalling a moment of genuine joy, the vibration changes. Even without anything happening on the outside, there is an internal realignment that alters how you perceive time and space. This recollection is not a retrieval of the past, but a reactivation of a specific frequency in the now. The field responds immediately, and the energy seems to circulate more lightly. It is the same principle by which a radio station can only pick up what is tuned to its band. The entire universe functions as a spectrum of frequencies, and the human mind is a conscious tuner within it. The challenge is that most people live in a state of continuous mental noise, fragmented thoughts, automatic judgments, constant worries. All of this generates vibrational interference that prevents clear perception of the field's responses. In this state, the mind becomes like a radio out of tune, picking up static instead of music. Inner silence is not an absence of thought, but a cleansing of frequency. When the mind grows quiet, it does not stop thinking. It simply thinks in purer frequencies, where each idea is charged with presence. To understand thoughts as frequencies is to understand that the world does not react to words, but to vibrational states. Language can lie, but vibration does not. The field picks up what you truly are, not what you claim to be. That is why changing thoughts without changing the emotion that sustains them is like trying to change the sound of an instrument without adjusting its strings. The real work is internal resonance, tuning yourself to the frequency that represents what you wish to experience. Throughout the day, you can test this with small pauses. Observe what you are thinking now and notice how the body responds. If there is contraction, the frequency is dissonant. If there is expansion, it is in harmony. Adjust the thought as one adjusts a note. Do this repeatedly until the mind learns to recognize the difference between noise and melody. This is the training of vibrational consciousness, and it does not depend on belief, only on refined perception. When thoughts become coherent, reality also reorganizes. Situations that were once chaotic gain clarity. People appear at the right moment, and time seems to flow in sync with intention. This coherence is not magic, it is physics. The field responds to vibrational order as a mirror responds to light. And the clearer the light you emit, the sharper the image that returns. Thinking, therefore, is an act of creation in real time. At every instant, your mental waves cross the field and sketch the probabilities of what will come. Becoming aware of this is the first step toward aligning with the universal intelligence that moves all things. Observation is the turning point between the invisible and the manifest. At the heart of quantum physics, this principle is known as the observer effect, the finding that the act of observing alters the behavior of subatomic particles. Before they are measured, they exist in a state of superposition, able to occupy several places at once. But the instant they are observed, they choose a position, a path, a reality. It is as if the universe awaited the conscious gaze to decide what it will be. The human mind participates in this same mystery. What you observe with attention becomes more real. Observation is more than seeing. It is the meeting between consciousness and the object observed. When you observe something, you transfer energy to it. The simple act of looking at a flower, a flame, or the movement of your own breath for a prolonged time modifies the field around those things. Attention is a beam of energy that organizes chaos. Where there is focus, there is a collapse of uncertainty. That is why, in everyday experience, the situations to which you give more attention tend to expand, and those you ignore seem to disappear. The world is shaped by the lenses of consciousness, but there is an essential detail. The manner of observing is as important as the act itself. Observing with judgment, expectation, or fear creates distortions. It is like trying to see a reflection in agitated water. The more force you apply, the cloudier the reflection becomes. Observing with presence, on the other, is allowing reality to reveal itself without trying to control it. In this state, the observer becomes transparent, and the field responds precisely. Pure observation is a form of silent love. It welcomes what is, without resistance. The power of observation is not limited to the external world. It acts even more deeply when directed inward. By observing a thought, you create a separation between it and the center of consciousness. The thought ceases to command and becomes just a transitory phenomenon. This simple shift changes everything. What was a mental whirlwind becomes movement understood. The energy previously trapped in automatism is released. It is at this point that the mind begins to serve consciousness, and not the other way around. When you observe an emotion without identifying with it, it dissolves more quickly. Anger, sadness, anxiety, all are forms of energy seeking recognition. What perpetuates them is not their existence, but the resistance you create in trying to deny them. Conscious observation is like opening a window in a closed room. The stagnant air renews naturally. The power lies not in fighting what you feel, but in allowing the feeling to be seen. The quantum field translates this permission as a release of energy, restoring vibrational balance. In practice, to observe is an act of radical presence. It means being whole in the now, without getting lost in memory or expectation. When attention stabilizes at this point, time seems to slow down. The moment expands and reveals layers of subtlety that previously went unnoticed. You begin to perceive details of the world, the texture of the air, the distant sound, the inner pulse, and understand that everything is alive. This expanded awareness is the field itself revealing through you. To observe is, therefore, a way of participating in the conscious creation of the universe. The human gaze is a creative lens. It selects, focuses, and gives meaning. Two observers can witness the same event and come away with completely different realities, because each gaze collapses a different version of the possible. Reality is not a finished film. It is a mosaic of probabilities in constant update. When you change the way you look, the scene changes as well. That is why an insoluble problem often seems to dissolve when you observe it from a new angle. Energy reorganizes as the gaze transforms. There is also an ethical dimension to this power. To observe is a form of responsibility. Everything you choose to see, feed, and sustain with attention grows in your experience. Modern culture is saturated with stimuli, and the scattered mind spends energy observing disconnected fragments. This superficial observation creates a confused vibrational field. When you learn to choose what you observe, and above all how you observe, you regain part of the sovereignty of your own energy. The conscious observer is a guardian of focus. On subtler levels, observation becomes a mirror of self-knowledge. What triggers intense reaction in you reveals the points where consciousness is not yet free. Observing without fleeing these mirrors is a practice of courage. What used to be shadow becomes a source of clarity. Little by little, the gaze becomes less defensive and more encompassing. You begin to see the world as a living organism of information, and each event as an opportunity to expand perception. The power of observation is, ultimately, the power to create without effort. When the gaze becomes clear, the field responds precisely, like a river finding its natural bed after a flood. Life begins to organize around presence, not haste. And as the observer matures, it becomes clear that the goal was never to control what is seen, but to become so conscious that everything seen turns into an expression of the same consciousness. At that point, To observe is the same as to love, a silent act of recognition between the self and the whole. Emotions are the oldest language of the universe. Before any word, even before articulated thought, the human being already vibrated in emotional frequencies that connected them to the quantum field. They are the sensory bridge between mind and matter, between the invisible and the lived. When an emotion is fully felt, it is not merely a biological response. It is an energetic transmission that informs the field who you are being at that moment. And the field, faithful in its neutrality, responds correspondingly, returning circumstances that resonate with that vibration. Science recognizes that emotions directly alter the body's chemistry. A thought of gratitude, sustained for a few minutes, reorganizes hormones, decreases cortisol, and raises oxytocin. A state of anger does the opposite. It constricts vessels, speeds up the heart, and floods the blood with adrenaline. These biochemical changes are not isolated. They generate measurable electric and magnetic fields that expand beyond the limits of the body. Each emotion is, therefore, a vibrational signature sent to the quantum field, influencing how reality organizes itself around you. Emotion is the energetic component of thought. If thought is frequency, emotion is amplitude. It is what gives propagation strength to what you create mentally. A thought without emotion is like a seed without water. It exists, but it does not germinate. When thought is watered by a coherent emotion, enthusiasm, love, trust, it gains density and the power to manifest. That is why understanding and cultivating emotions is essential to understanding the creative process itself. However, most people were taught to repress feeling. From an early age, we learn to judge emotions as good or bad, when in fact all of them carry information. Fear, for example, indicates that the mind is projecting a threat scenario. Anger shows where a boundary has been crossed. Sadness reveals what needs to be released. None of them is an enemy. The problem arises when we resist the message and try to silence them without understanding. By doing so, the energy becomes stagnant, accumulating as tension, symptoms, and emotional repetitions. The quantum field does not respond to what you pretend to feel, but to what vibrates most strongly within you. Feigning calm, when there is restlessness, generates a contradictory signal. The universe is not fooled by words. It reads coherence. True transformation happens when you allow yourself to feel what is, without dramatizing, without denying. When emotion is welcomed, it moves. And when it moves, it transmutes. This emotional alchemy is the most direct way to realign your personal frequency with the universal flow. It is possible to perceive the body as an instrument of emotional translation. It always speaks first. A pressure in the chest, a knot in the stomach, a sudden heat. These are ways the body tries to translate energetic messages that the mind has not yet grasped. When you ignore these messages, the vibration increases in intensity until it becomes discomfort. When you listen attentively, the energy organizes and the body returns to balance. This listening is an act of consciousness, observing what you feel without judgment, and allowing the feeling to express itself completely. The highest emotions, such as gratitude, serene joy, and compassion, are not rewards for good deeds, but vibrational states that expand the energy field and facilitate conscious interaction with the universe. They create long, smooth, coherent waves capable of synchronizing mind, body, and environment. It is in this state that synchronicities intensify, that the right encounters happen, and that intuition becomes clear. These emotions cannot be artificially manufactured, but they can be cultivated through presence and acceptance of what is. When you allow an emotion to move through you completely, something opens. The energy that was condensed becomes creative movement. Sadness can become compassion, anger can become strength, fear can become perception. This process is not linear. It is organic, like the tides, rising and receding in cycles. Consciousness learns to dance with emotions instead of fighting them, and gradually, it discovers that feeling is the true channel of communication with the cosmos. The field does not understand orders, it understands vibrations. You cannot ask for happiness while vibrating in distrust. But you can feel, even for brief moments, the flavor of a broader emotion and allow it to expand. Each time you access a genuine feeling of love or gratitude, the field reorganizes to sustain that new frequency. It is a silent, yet precise dialogue. The universe responds in vibrational echoes, and each emotion you cultivate is a sentence in this infinite conversation. The language of emotions is also the language of creation. Everything you experience is, ultimately, a response to the vibrations you emit. To understand this is to understand that feeling is the most creative act there is. Emotion is the compass that indicates whether you are sailing toward coherence or dissonance with the field. It does not need to be controlled, only understood. And the deeper the understanding, the clearer the communication between you and the universe becomes. Now close your eyes for a moment and notice what you feel at this instant. Not what you think you should feel, but what truly vibrates in you. This simple observation is already a gesture of alignment. If this reflection resonated with something within you, share in the comments a single word that translates your emotion at this moment. Just one. It could be peace, clarity, change, or any vibration that is alive there. Writing is a way to anchor the frequency in the field, and each sincere word becomes part of this web of consciousness we are weaving together. And if this content touched you in any way, like this video, so that more people can rediscover the power of feeling and remember that the universe speaks, above all, in the language of emotions. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything that exists in its purest form. It is the space where consciousness rests before becoming thought, the point of origin of every vibration. When you approach this state, something essential happens. The mind ceases its compulsion to interpret, and the quantum field begins to reveal itself without filters. In that instant, time seems to dilate. The boundaries between inside and outside dissolve, and the simple fact of existing becomes enough. Silence is the portal through which presence manifests. In a culture that values noise, constant doing, and productivity, silence can feel uncomfortable. It confronts the uninterrupted movement of the ego, which seeks meaning in sound, action, and speech. But it is precisely in this space of pause that consciousness finds its center again. Silence is the recalibration point of the energetic system. Just as a musical instrument needs moments of rest between notes for the melody to exist, the mind needs intervals of stillness for wisdom to emerge. Presence is the living form of silence. It is not a state of passivity, but of total attention. When you are present, every detail gains sharpness. The sound of the wind, the rhythm of breathing, the weight of the body supported by the earth. The mind does not run to the future or return to the past. It aligns with what is before it. It is at this point that the quantum field becomes accessible. Presence is the state of maximum coherence between mind, body, and energy, the moment when the observer and the observed merge into a single perception. Science has been subtly confirming the effects of this quality of attention. Studies on meditative states show that when the brain enters alpha and theta waves, there is a reduction in neural noise and an increase in coherence between brain regions. This balance creates a resonance that extends to the nervous system, the heart, and the electromagnetic field around the body. In quantum terms, the observer becomes clearer and the field responds with greater precision. Inner silence, therefore, is not emptiness, but a form of fine-tuning with the universe. There is a deep difference between being quiet and being in silence. Being quiet is controlling sound. Being in silence is ceasing effort. In the first, there is still tension. In the second, there is surrender. When effort disappears, a wide listening arises, an openness that does not select what it wants to hear, but welcomes everything. In this state, thought loses its dominion, and being simply perceives. It is at this point that presence becomes a transformative force. It does not need to act. Its mere existence reorganizes the field. Silence is also the mirror where truth is reflected without distortion. In it, the mind has nowhere to hide. Everything that is false, justifications, narratives, masks, dissolves, because silence does not converse with illusions. It only reveals. That is why often the first contact with deep silence can bring discomfort. It is like looking into a transparent lake and seeing the bottom for the first time. But as the courage to remain grows, that gaze becomes liberating. What once seemed empty reveals itself to be full of life. Presence is not something to be achieved, but something recognized when the inner noise dissolves. It has always been there, beneath the layers of thought. It is like the sky, which remains unchanging while the clouds pass. The mind tries to do presence, but presence is not a doing, it is a state of being. When you realize this, effort gives way to naturalness, the quantum field aligns, and vital energy begins to circulate smoothly. It is an experience of integration in which the body becomes light and the mind transparent. Practicing silence does not mean withdrawing from the world, but changing the quality of listening. Even amid movement, it is possible to be in silence. A musician does not need to stop playing to hear the music. He only needs to listen from within. In the same way, you can act, speak, and create without leaving stillness. Silent presence is the point of balance between doing and being. It is the ability to be whole in every gesture, aware that each act is a wave emitted to the field. Silence and presence are also the keys to intuition. When the mind grows quiet, the flow of information from the field becomes perceptible. Answers that once seemed distant emerge naturally, without rational effort. This wisdom does not come from outside, but from a deeper level of consciousness. It does not speak in words, but in sensations, synchronicities, and subtle perceptions. It is the universe responding in real time to your openness. Silence is the channel, presence is the antenna, and intuition is the signal. By cultivating silence, you become less reactive and more receptive. Emotions lose the power to sweep you away. Thoughts become clear, and the body aligns with a more organic rhythm. Life begins to move in cadence with the very breath of the universe. In this state, there is no longer a need to seek spiritual connections. You realize you are already connected. Silence reveals the truth that has always been there. Presence is the permanent link between you and the whole. Silence is the language of the quantum field, and presence is the living translation of that language. When you listen to the world without the ego's filter, you discover that everything essential speaks in this tone. It is a language made of pauses, intervals, and breaths. And in that space between one thought and another, the universe speaks, not with words, but with the gentle vibration of the conscious being who recognizes itself in everything that exists. There are moments when reality seems to conspire with a precision impossible to plan. You think of someone and, seconds later, that person sends a message. An obstacle that seemed insurmountable dissolves unexpectedly. A random event brings exactly the answer you needed to hear. These are not accidental events, but subtle manifestations of the quantum field in response to your state of coherence. When the mind, the heart, and intention vibrate in harmony, the universe responds with signs of synchronicity, small confirmations that you are aligned with the flow of universal consciousness. Signs of connection are not miracles in the extraordinary sense, but natural expressions of a participatory reality. The quantum field is sensitive to observation and emotional frequencies, and when you reach a certain level of inner clarity, you begin to perceive that the world around you organizes itself intelligently. Coincidences stop seeming random and begin to form a living language, made of symbols, encounters, and subtle movements. Each sign is a mirror of the vibration you sustain. These manifestations occur more frequently when there is presence and inner quiet. The scattered mind does not notice them, for it is too busy trying to control the future or fix the past. Connection reveals itself in the pause between thoughts, in the instant when attention rests completely in the now. It is in this space that the field communicates its response. A sign does not speak in words, but in correspondences, a repeating number sequence, a phrase overheard by chance, a sensation of expansion that arises for no apparent reason. The more you recognize this language, the more it intensifies. The rational mind tends to doubt these phenomena, interpreting them as meaningless coincidences. But there is a fundamental difference between chance and synchronicity. Chance is a statistical encounter. Synchronicity is a meaningful correspondence. The difference lies in the observer. When there is consciousness, experience gains context and purpose. Synchronicity is how the universe confirms that you are in dialogue with it. It is the echo of your vibration returning in the form of an event. And the deeper the emotional coherence, the faster this echo manifests. The body also participates in this communication. Before an external sign appears, there is an internal adjustment, a feeling of lightness, an expansion in the chest, a sudden clarity. These are vibrational harbingers. The field anticipates, preparing the observer to recognize the response. Therefore, signs do not need to be sought. They arise naturally when there is receptivity. Seeking too much creates noise. Allowing is what makes room for the field to express itself. Connection is established through surrender, not anxious searching. There is a silent order guiding events when you are in tune. This does not mean that everything becomes easy, but that even challenges begin to carry meaning. A setback can reveal the exact path that should be taken. A delay can prevent a greater mismatch. The field does not work with human morals or logic, but with vibrational coherence. It reorganizes reality according to the dominant frequency you emit. When that frequency is aligned with trust, life's movement gains its own rhythm, and the signs multiply like beacons along the way. Recognizing signs requires humility and discernment. Not everything that happens is a message, but everything can be used as a mirror. The mature mind does not seek excessive meanings, but observes with sensitivity and lets the field itself indicate what is relevant. When something repeats consistently and awakens a sense of inner truth, it is likely that the sign is legitimate. The criterion is not logic, but resonance. The way the body and consciousness respond to what presents itself. Ancient cultures intuitively understood this communication. They called it omens, oracles, or messages from the gods. Today, the language has changed, but the essence remains. The quantum field continues to mirror the observer's inner state. The difference is that now we can understand this process not as superstition, but as an energetic interaction. Human consciousness is an active node in the cosmic information network. Each thought, each emotion, and each intention sends signals and receives responses. Synchronicity is the feedback of this exchange. When you begin to notice these patterns, something within you expands. Reality ceases to appear as a chaotic set of events and reveals itself as an intelligent choreography. The lines between spirituality and science dissolve, and a simpler understanding arises. The universe is alive and responds to the consciousness that perceives it. At this point, the prevailing feeling is gratitude. Each sign, however small, becomes a reminder that you are not separate, that there is constant communication happening on subtle levels. It is possible to cultivate this sensitivity. The more attention you give to the signs, without obsession, only with calm curiosity, the clearer the communication becomes. The field seems to reward the attentive observer, as if saying, "Yes, it's this way." Over time, life begins to move in a state of continuous flow, where decisions are guided not by calculation, but by direct perception. You stop forcing and begin to follow. And, in this following, the connection strengthens. Signs of connection are not the privilege of a few. They are part of the nature of consciousness. They have always been present, but most people live in too much noise to hear them. When you grow quieter, the field speaks. When you trust, it responds. The mind that observes with purity turns reality into dialogue. And every meaningful coincidence is, in truth, a greeting from the universe saying, "I hear you, keep going." Attunement with the quantum field is not a gift reserved for a few, but a natural ability that can be cultivated. Just as a musician tunes their instrument to draw out the purity of sound, a human being can adjust their inner frequency to vibrate in harmony with the flow of the universe. This tuning is not achieved through intellectual effort, but through presence, coherence, and conscious intention. Strengthening attunement is, above all, an act of remembering that you are already part of the whole, that separation is only an illusion created by the noise of the mind. Attunement is strengthened when there is clarity of intention. The quantum field responds to consistent vibrations, and intention is the vector that directs that vibration. It is not about wishing anxiously, but about establishing an internal state that represents what you wish to manifest. A clear intention is silent, steady, and unpretentious. It neither begs nor forces. It simply remains present as a stable frequency. The field recognizes this stability and begins to reorganize the circumstances around you to reflect the new pattern. Emotional coherence is the core of this attunement. When there is harmony between what you think, what you feel, and what you do, the signal the field receives becomes clear. Vibrational disorder arises from inner conflict, wanting something while doubting it at the same time, asking for peace while feeding on fear, desiring freedom while staying attached to old narratives. Each contradiction creates interference, like two out-of-phase waves that cancel each other out. Strengthening attunement is gradually eliminating these dissonances until the body, mind, and emotion play the same note. The body is the first mirror of this coherence. It reacts instantly to attunement or disconnection. When there is alignment, the body relaxes, the breath flows, the energy circulates lightly. When there is misalignment, tension, fatigue, and resistance appear. Learning to listen to the body is a direct way to measure your frequency. It does not lie. It is the first translator of the vibrations you emit. Cultivating this listening is essential to keep attunement alive, for the field responds to states, not words. There is also a rhythmic aspect in maintaining attunement. Just as the heart beats and the tides rise and fall, consciousness also expands and withdraws in cycles. There will be days of clarity and days of noise, moments of flow and moments of pause. Strengthening attunement is not about eliminating variations, but about remaining lucid within them. Oscillation is natural. What matters is the ability to return to center. Each return reinforces vibrational stability. Over time, the dominant frequency of consciousness rises, and the field begins to respond in an increasingly refined way. The practice of silence, observation, and gratitude are effective ways to recalibrate this attunement. Silence dissolves the excess of mental noise. Observation brings clarity to the patterns that need adjustment, and gratitude expands the emotional field into higher frequencies. Gratitude, in particular, is one of the most coherent vibrational forces that exist. It does not depend on external conditions. It is a way of recognizing the invisible order behind every experience. When you give thanks, even without apparent reason, the field reorganizes to show you why. Strengthening attunement also means learning to trust the timing of the field. The ego wants immediate results, but the field responds to the maturation of frequency, not the urgency of desire. Sometimes, what you ask for cannot yet manifest because your vibrational state is not compatible with the reality you wish to create. Forcing only generates frustration. When you relax and maintain coherence without anxiety, alignment happens naturally. The field does not fail. It merely waits for you to become the type of energy that corresponds to what you wish to receive. Trust is the silent foundation of this attunement. To trust is not to believe that everything will turn out well, but to know that, whatever happens, the field always reflects what needs to be seen for the growth of consciousness. Even challenging circumstances are opportunities to recalibrate the vibrational pattern. When you observe them with clarity, you realize that every experience has a function, to bring you closer to the frequency of balance. This perception transforms resistance into learning and keeps the flow open. Over time, attunement becomes a natural state. The dialogue with the field ceases to be sporadic and becomes constant. The answers come in the form of intuition, coincidences, and subtle sensations. You begin to move through feeling, not fear. Decisions flow, connections happen effortlessly, and time adapts to your presence. It is as if the universe begins to breathe in the same rhythm as you. At this point, life ceases to be a sequence of attempts and becomes a continuous experience of resonance. Maintaining this attunement requires simplicity. The more you try to control, the more you distort the field. The secret is to remain authentic, transparent, and present. Each honest thought, each conscious gesture, each attentive breath strengthens the bond. The field responds to vibrational truth, not spiritual performance. To be in attunement is to be real, to feel what is, to accept the moment, and to allow life to flow through you without resistance. When consciousness learns to trust this flow, the connection with the whole becomes permanent. Strengthening attunement is, in essence, remembering that the universe is not outside, but within. The quantum field is not something to be reached. It is the very space in which your consciousness moves. The deeper the remembrance of this unity, the clearer the communication between you and the cosmos becomes. And when that communication is constant, what we call a miracle ceases to be an exception and becomes the natural expression of a being in complete harmony with universal intelligence. Quantum consciousness is not a distant concept, but the intimate recognition that you and the universe are expressions of the same intelligence. Every thought, emotion, and gesture are waves that cross the field and return as experience. When there is presence, the real becomes dialogue. When there is silence, the cosmos speaks. The path is not to accumulate knowledge, but to remember what has always been there, the unity between mind, energy, and creation. Awakening is simple, to be conscious of yourself in everything that is. If you have reached this point, write in the comments, "I am connected," so that I know you have completed this journey. And if this content resonated with you, subscribe and continue exploring this communion between consciousness and the universe.